My name is Carole Reed, and I'm a program director in CBET. I do the Electrochemical Systems program, and I'm joined by my colleague, Bill Obrick. And do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Bill Obrick. I'm a program director also in CBET, and I direct a program that's called Particulate and Multi-Phase Processes.
Right. So we're going to be talking about after the review. This is unfortunate in the circumstances if your career proposal is not selected for award. So what do you do first? So first of all, I want to emphasize, again, engineering has dedicated career panels, and your project was reviewed by senior faculty experts whose combined expertise spans the entire program. So for example, in my program, I get a number of career proposals that I can review them in one panel. And so I'm staffing that with senior faculty that cover all the topics of the proposals. So their combined expertise kind of covers everything. So it is quite a more heterogeneous panel compared to, for example, the review environment of an unsolicited proposal panel. So first of all, we really recommend you take some time after you receive the notice of decline. Yes, it is very disappointing. We recognize that, but take some time before you kind of maybe look at the reviews, and then just kind of gingerly let the reviews settle before you analyze them. And so don't contact the program officer right away. Just you want to make sure you have some time to fully reflect on some of the content. And so we're going to kind of give you some hints on maybe strategies of looking for the reviews. So first, look at the panel summary first, and primarily. This represents the discussion of what happened in the panel. And so this will reflect what the panel thought was most important in terms of the strengths and weaknesses that they found in the intellectual merit, broader impacts, in the integration of education and research. And it might be obvious, but make sure you make note of the positive aspects of the review. What did they like? So look for keywords like, the novelty of this, or it was innovative, or this piece was transformative. Bill,
remember that the panel summary is written immediately following the discussion at the panel. The individual reviews were written before the panel got together. So they were written individually. The panel summary is hitting the high points of the discussion. So sometimes you'll see comments in individual reviews, and there's nothing about them in the panel summary. It could well be that the panel didn't really discuss that it wasn't judged as one of the key points that led to the recommendation for the proposal. So the panel summary plays a really special role in this, and you should be focusing at first, for sure, on this panel summary, and then delve into the individual reviews. But the individual reviews will have lots of technical details and so forth that the panel summary may not have. And one way to kind of analyze these documents that you get back is to look for criticisms that were mentioned more than once. So it came up in 2 different reviews or 3 different reviews. And those are the things you really want to focus on, because it's likely that unless you address those criticisms, and when you resubmit the proposal, it's likely that they will come up again. If 3 reviewers saw it once, then chances are reviewers are going to see it again. So those are the things that we stress that PI should look for. And this also applies to unsolicited proposals too. So after you've had time to think about that and let it sink in, and really wait long enough so that you can appreciate the effort that's gone in to writing these reviews, even if they're tough to read, then at that point, you want to make an appointment with your program director. And the program director can provide additional insight, can relate the context of those statements. Remember, the program director heard the entire discussion, and so they will be able to give you a little bit more of the context. You can just send an email to the program director and say you'd like to discuss the review of your proposal. And again, career proposal is the way to put it. And just wait for a response and schedule a time to meet with the program director.
Right. So now we're going to cover a couple of common deficiencies that the reviewers point out, and also, as program officers, we're looking for. So first of all, foremost that I highlight is the project concept wasn't well supported by a substantive literature review. And this is one piece that is totally under your control. And so you want to make sure your literature search is deep enough to really make the case that there is a gap in knowledge that your project is addressing. And then you can make the case of why is it important to have this new knowledge that your project will generate. Bill?
Yeah, in my experience, this is the #1 criticism that comes up most often in career proposals, is that the literature review is missing key works. And like Carole said, that literature review is going to be used as your springboard to the knowledge gap that you're going to fill in the proposal. So it's really important that you have it. The literature has expanded tremendously. It's a lot of effort to do it, but it's really important. These are senior people. They'll know the literature well.
Right. So the next piece has to do with the scope and the approach that you're using as part of your project, that it's not defined. Reviewers really appreciate you stating up very early in your proposal and very clearly, what are you trying to do with this project, and what are the expected outcomes, and why are they important? And then you can get into greater detail later in the proposal. But they really appreciate to have that clear argument early in the proposal. Also, when you're constructing your project, again, this is a 5-year project. Frequently, it's criticized that what you put into your proposal was too broad and numerous for the time period. Again, these projects are not your whole laboratory, everything happening in your laboratory. It's a 5-year project. For engineering, typically the resources are 1 full-time graduate student and some summer salary for yourself. So make sure those activities and the resources are aligned. Bill?
Yes. So with respect to point #2, I just want to emphasize what Carole said. You really don't want to hold back on what you're going to do. Sometimes we get proposals. You almost get the sense that the PI is afraid to say, well, here's what I'm really going to do. And during the review of those proposals, the way the reviewers will react is, well, it was really interesting to read, but I had no idea what they were going to do until I got to page 11, which is too late. So be upfront about it. And then I think you'll find that reviewers are then engaged by the idea, and then they'll read more deeply throughout the rest of the proposal. And like Carole said, it's not a huge grant. So make sure it's a sign of maturity that you can propose activities that are reasonable for the time and the budget.
Right. And the next kind of set are, of course, for a career proposal, it's this integration of research and education. The argument that you made wasn't clear to the reviewers. So really be clear on how your research enriches your role as an educator, and how your role as an educator enriches your research program. It's these 2 pieces of enrichment. And then it's the outcomes, what's coming out of this project, in terms of stating what fundamental knowledge would result from the project and its innovation and why it's important to the field. It goes towards the intellectual merit, and clear results from the 5-year project for societal outcomes. And this is the broader impacts. And so what basically to make clear of what is happening, if you include activities for the broader impacts, what happens during the 5-year period. Frequently, PIs focus more on past activities or their track record, rather than making really clear on what is happening during the project and its outcome. Bill?
Well, I would just add that if you read the proposal guide, one of the things it says about broader impacts, in fact, it's the first bullet in the proposal guide description of broader impacts, is the impact of the research itself. So you want to be clear to show in your proposal why what you are proposing to do is important. how it will benefit the community, society as a whole. If all the research is successful, here are the benefits that you could see. That should be clear, and the reviewers should not have to figure that out for themselves.
Right. So some other considerations is, again, to make clear that the project you're proposing is sufficiently independent of your PhD and/or postdoc projects. And overall, again, the purpose of the career project is to provide a firm foundation for your career as an educator and research. What do you want to be known for? Your vision. And that should be a really clear message as part of a career proposal. And so Bill, for this top two, or?
Yeah, so this leads me to the second most frequent criticism that I hear in career panels. And that is when reviewers say, well, this is a really interesting proposal, but it's not a career proposal. It really is an unsolicited proposal. And what they mean by that is that it hasn't addressed that second bullet, that there's no sense of how this research project will impact the long-term career development. So this is a relatively modest project, but the reviewers want to see how you'll use that as a springboard to what comes next and how it begins to shape your longer term vision. And the flexibility of the career proposal is that it allows you to describe that.
Right. So the last set we kind of covered of the reviewers definitely want to see your research as more than incremental, and you can make that case in part through the degree of depth that you put in your literature search and your arguments of how your project fits within the field of knowledge. There again, this is a 5-year project, so there is this juggling, well, between making your scope sufficiently ambitious, but then it has to be doable within this 5-year time frame of the project. Again, this project is not your whole laboratory. It is a specific 5-year project with a scope of activities that is doable within that 5-year period. And for engineering, typically that's the resources of one full-time graduate student and some summer salary for yourself. But definitely, and then since this is a career project, to make sure you make that point of how your project achieves effective integration of your education and research. So for many programs in engineering, reviewers definitely appreciate research that is really guided by testable hypotheses. For all these pieces, these are questions and conversations you can have with your program director. So you're going to have about 15 minutes in your breakouts, and I guess you'll be posting questions to the KaiStorm page, and then we're going to come back and we're going to get to as many of your questions as we can. So it looks like you guys have given us some really good questions, and we'll try to cover them as much as we can. And again, the little slides we have, we'll have them posted to the KaiStorm website. So just to be clear, when you submit a revised proposal that's been declined, the reviewers for the next cycle don't have access to the previous version of their proposal or any reviews. So they treat it, well, they do. They just think it's a new career proposal. And so it's probably not a good idea to refer to past review language or that, because it will probably confuse the present set of reviewers because they don't have access to any of that. And there's some chance that the reviewer might have seen your proposal before, but that's probably not a great chance. So you really want to treat this proposal as a new submission and address the strengths and weaknesses, address the weaknesses and as part of a new proposal. So let's see,
there's several questions about
Just-
when to contact a program director
Right.
after the decline, after you received the notice of the decline. And I would say just let it sink in for a couple of weeks, but there's no magic time.
Right. I think it's after you've had a time to fully reflect on the reviews and such. And then if you don't hear right away, make sure in the subject line of the email you say, I want to ask you about my career project. And, we really kind of give priority to make sure that we're getting the questions answered from career proposals. So, and if you don't hear from us for just a couple of days, it's okay to just ping us again. It's no problem. It's not being rude or anything. We're just all as busy as everyone. So just ping us again.
There are a couple questions that have to do with how to deal with specific reviewer comments, and taking into account that the next time you submit, the same person might not be reviewing your proposal. And the other question that's related to it is how do you deal with contradictory reviewer comments? And I think that in terms of these specific comments like that, you have to judge whether or not, first of all, do you agree with the comment? And then second of all, is it something that appears in the summary as a decision that led to the recommendation? In that case, I would take it quite seriously, even if the same reviewer might not be there next time. If it's just an isolated comment in a review, then you have to decide, after you decide if you do agree with it, then I would say it's probably worthwhile making some adjustment. But sometimes you do see resubmissions where the PI has taken a comment that was in a review and devoted 3/4 of a page to an explanation about it. And this will confuse subsequent reviewers. They won't understand why you're going into such detail about a very specific item. So you have to use your judgment. On the contradictory reviews, yes, I think that's a question you can ask of a program director to try to put that in perspective. But sometimes the contradictory reviews may just be that two people interpreted what you wrote differently. And so one thing that you could do first is go back and check your proposal. Is there a way that two people could have seen this same sentence or two differently?
So there's a quick question. Is there a repository for best practices for career proposals? From NSF's, no, but we will have the posted slides, and also on the NSF career page, there will be slides, and there's also going to be a webinar May 14th or 20th as well. This covers NSF wide, and the slides will be posted that. And many institutions also have kind of resources for proposal writing. Here's one of, I realized my proposal was rejected. It's better with another program. Is it a bad thing to resubmit to a program that is different than the one it submitted to last year? No, I think that is a potential avenue that you might take. I think it's important to talk to both program officers to make sure that your project sufficiently aligns from that program director's opinion to the one that you want to submit to. But no, that is definitely something that that would be appropriate. But conversations with the affected program officers is really important. Bill, do you want to take a?
Yeah, there are a couple of questions that address the issue that it may be 1 or may even be 2 years between the first submission and the next one. And while that time has elapsed, you've been making progress on the project, you may have published some papers. And so now the question becomes, what does your proposal look like? Some of the work that you proposed may have already been completed. So you do want to adjust the proposal to take that into account for sure, because you do not want to give the impression that what you're proposing you've already done, or you've done a substantial fraction of it. That's true for career and also for unsolicited proposals. So you want to update your ideas, update your goals, update the specific activities that you will plan based on your results thus far.
So there's another question of, if a career proposal needs to focus on a high-risk project, that's kind of far from past work, would it be a good strategy to justify the qualification with preliminary data? Yes, in part, that could be one strategy. Again, preliminary data for preliminary data's sake is really not the point. Preliminary data can provide proof of concept for maybe it's a technique that's high risk and you have the preliminary data, and it could also be from the literature as well, a similar technique. And it also provides the argument of track record that you've had to do this type of work. So reviewers just want to make sure that we want to value, we want high risk, high reward research at NSF, but reviewers just want to make sure that the project doesn't fall apart if a key risky piece doesn't work the way you want it to, that there are some contingency plans in place. Bill, do you want to take the next one? Or?
Okay. Let's see. I'm looking for questions that kind of show up a couple of times. There are a couple of questions that deal with independence from your PhD and your postdoc, and how do you establish it? And this is a tough issue. If you get a criticism that it seems to be an extension of your doctoral or postdoctoral work, then I think you want to address that head on and say, well, this is what I did for my postdoc, or this is what I did for my PhD, and it inspired me to look at this, which is quite different. And I think that the best way to deal with that is to be frank about the relationship between what you're proposing and your past work, especially if you've gotten that criticism. Remember, the flexibility of this format allows you to tell it as a story. And so it is perfectly fine. Some of the best career proposals I've seen just almost are a narrative about how you arrived at this situation, how you learned enough to be qualified to do the research you're proposing. And so you can turn that PhD and postdoc experience into a big plus if you sort of show that you're now leveraging what you learned and advancing into something new.
There's some question about, or maybe you covered the specific reviewer comments, knowing that they won't review again. Again, I think for some of the strategies, you definitely want to reflect on the panel summary, because that's kind of the consolidated view of the whole panel. And then look for weaknesses that have been pointed out by more than one person. Those are the general themes that people found in terms of weaknesses. There's basically how long a description of the 10 to 20 vision will be. That's up to you. Again, think of the career proposal as a career development proposal. You want to give the reviewers an idea of what you want to be known for in terms of your expertise and what you're trying to do for education, and the activities and the research activities that you put as part of your proposal support that vision, and they're doable within the 5-year time frame. So
yeah, I would agree. And there are several questions that have to do with the structure of the proposal. And one way to think about this is to look at it from the reviewer's standpoint. They're reading before the panel probably 6, 7, maybe 8 proposals, something like that. And it's a big chore for reviewers to do that. So anything you do to make it easy on reviewers by addressing the key points, showing them these are the key points, the take-home message in the proposal is very helpful. And at the same time, use the flexibility of the format to make it interesting. And that will help the reviewers get through the proposal, pay attention to what you're writing. And it will, I can't say that it will necessarily lead to an award, but you'll get better feedback from the reviewers that way.
All right, let's see. I think we have time for question. Well, there's one of how thorough should a successful proposal's contingency plans be, given it is a 5-year high-risk project? I think in general, reviewers don't want to see the project fall apart if a key theme or objective theme doesn't work out the way. They want to make sure that fundamental knowledge results either way it happens. And so that's kind of more the argument that you're providing for contingency. But again, NSF does want high risk, high reward research, but you want to make sure you just provide that additional arguments for those particularly high risk portions.
There's a question that asks, should you list open questions in the research plan, or are you expected to basically know it all? And so I think it is expected that the research will confront questions that are unknown. Otherwise, it wouldn't be research. And to lay them out carefully and discuss them carefully, I think is a hallmark of a really good proposal. If you include too many details, would it make the research plan incremental? Well, not necessarily. I mean, one of the things that reviewers often criticize is that a lack of detail on how things will be done. I don't think that necessarily means it's incremental, but we also remind reviewers that there's page limits, and so you can't expect everything to be in the proposal. But no, I don't think too many details necessarily make it incremental.
Okay.
We have time for one more, maybe?
Yeah.
It's got to be a quick one.
Okay, converting a career proposal to a regular one. Is that a reasonable plan, given that they're different? I think if you want to convert your career to an unsolicited proposal, then you really should build it from scratch. Keep the main idea, maybe parts of the research plan are the same, but don't lead reviewers to think that this is a retreaded career proposal.
And the converse is it's usually not successful to turn an unsolicited proposal into a career proposal because they're totally different animals.
They're different animals, yeah.
Yes.
Behooves
Okay.
you to treat them differently.
Yes.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
Yeah, and we'll post the materials.